Today is June 5th, 2025, and I am still out here in Little Rock, Arkansas. Today, I will be with my second Little Rock native for Books on the Bed, and that is Kevin Brockmeier. Despite it only being early June, it is so hot that you might as well stand in front of a blowtorch. But that's okay, because I found a hidden gem bookstore to stay cool in for a couple of hours before I see Kevin. And actually, Kevin was the one who told me about it. And it's in Searcy, not Searcy, Arkansas. It's called Books by the Pound. Look it up. It's absolutely incredible. I could have spent 2 more hours there. It's in the middle of nowhere, about 50 minutes north of Little Rock. So it's really hard to find. And I'm really thankful that Kevin told me about it. And I'm riding on that high because I found a few replacement books that I'd given away as gifts and a couple new ones as well. But truly, it's just a magic land in there. It's incredible. And you would never guess it was in Searcy. So shouts out Books by the Pound. Go there when you get a chance. But today is awesome because it's another example of one person leading to another person and it just feeling right. As you know, I interviewed Jen Fox yesterday, Little Rock native. She's the one that told me about Kevin Brockmeier. This was last year at some point, and I started reading his books, and I was like, oh my gosh, where has Kevin been all my life? His books are incredible. Thank you, Jen, for putting me on to him. And then a couple of months ago, when I was rolling through Little Rock, I actually got dinner with Jen and Kevin. And so we were able to meet and just talking over dinner about books and life. I just knew that I had to come back and make Kevin a part of this Arkansas trip for Books on the Bed, and I'm really glad that I did. I have a feeling this is going to be an all-timer. I just think that someone like Kevin, who is so generous with other writers and with people just like me, little people who can't write like that, I want to share their work and who they are with as many people as possible because I believe that kind of goodness spreads. But I can say this, if you read Kevin's stories, and I bet if you read the books that he shares today, they're the kinds of stories that strengthen your heart to keep living well and good and kind in this world. And they also help you embrace the mystery and absurdity of this world and to seek out its beauty and to do that together with other people and to be generous. I think his books are guides to living. And you can't ask for much more than that from an author. And I think you'll see too in his own life when we talk about where he's from and the work he's done, you'll want to emulate the qualities that Kevin has. And I haven't known him very long, but I hope to get his books in as many hands as possible just because I think it's going to be good for the world. You're listening to Books on the Bed, where I travel through the country asking our hosts, if I came to your town and stayed at your house, what books would you put on my bed? Each host will share 6 books for me to carry with me on the journey of my life. And I'm here to share those books with you. As we go, we're building a digital library with every book put on every bed across the country. And who knows, maybe someday, the world. We are trying to share as many diverse stories as possible to part a curtain between us and bring us closer to each other. We hope these books and conversations make a meaningful difference in your life. Thank you for listening and being with us on this journey. But there was something you said that really resonated with me. Well, 2 things. First, that you are an evangelist for the things you love. Mm-hmm. And one of the things about being a bookseller and just a lover of art for me is the power that you can have to put things that you love into other people's hands and share that. And I think that I really don't like people who just talk about things they hate. Mm-hmm. I find that really exhausting. Doesn't mean you can't have things you hate. I have books I hate plenty. It's kind of like your list that you keep secret of your 50 worst books.
Yeah.
And you click on it and it's like, did you really think I would publicize this?
Yeah.
But I know you have it. We all have it.
Yeah. Books in the fireplace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Books in the bonfire.
There you go. Yes.
Actually, that would be a hilarious podcast spin-off.
I wonder if anybody would be willing and open enough to do that.
I doubt it.
Okay.
Too political,
Yeah.
You can't trash authors. You can do it in secret. We'll do it off record. But I feel the same way. It's like when you really love stuff, you want to share it. And you had this quote, I find most of the big institutional year-end lists pretty uninspired. Even worse are the mass consensus lists that occasionally bubble up, like that survey of the New York Times published last summer ranking the 100 best books of the 21st century, which seemed tailor-made to favor the expected and only the expected, and therefore generated an entire box of beige and gray crayons. Completely maddening. That was one of the most succinct ways of putting that, and it's how I feel. They are beige and gray crayons. And I can't stand that, because how do you not have a Louise Erdrich book on top 100? That's crazy to me. But
did they fail to include Louise Erdrich? Yeah.
So there's a million books that were better than those books, in my opinion, but they don't make it out there. But the reason this resonated with me is I think we need to give more shine to the people that give us color. And I think you're one of those writers. Truly. I am so grateful that Jen shared your books. That's exactly what we need, because now I just am a huge fan of yours.
Thank you.
And I think you've made my world more whole with your books. I think my life is better because I've read your books. And so I want to thank you by hopefully bringing some color to your life with some gifts.
The idea of books that make your life more whole, that could be the theme for the conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah.
Because I think all of the books I'm going to choose have had that effect on me.
I'm not surprised to hear you say that.
Okay.
And I'm glad that landed.
Yeah.
Sometimes that just happens where it just all makes sense. But that's just the best way for me to say it. I finished your books and I've been a little unsettled by some of what you've written. But at the same time, I do feel that wholeness. And there is something about books that make me want to be more part of the world than I already am. To be more curious, to go further into it, to meet more people, to enjoy it. Yeah, that's what it's given me. So I'm glad that we'll have that theme. But we'll start with... Oh my gosh, I have so many books here. Nope, this is for Tony.
Okay.
Okay, I went overboard. and it was really hard to get these books and pick a gift, because I'm like, what have you not read?
Yeah, it's...
But I can guarantee you haven't read these.
All right.
So we're going to start with the first one, because it just came out this week.
Okay.
And this is specifically because of your love of making lists. And I was with this author a couple of weeks ago in Pittsburgh. And when he picked his books on the bed, one of them was because, actually two of them, those authors were list makers.
Okay.
And he resonated with that. He's similar to you with tons of cultural knowledge and can reference a million things. So I thought you would appreciate this book because of that connection.
And this is a Pittsburgh-based writer?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you can open it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I love the wrapping paper. Where did it come from?
City Lights Bookstore.
All right.
Sylvan, North Carolina.
Very nice. I have got some fun wrapping paper that I can show you after our conversation. I definitely have not read this. Oh, but I was just listening to an NPR interview with him, I think yesterday. So I'm very curious about this.
Yep, that's how they get you.
That's How They Get You, an unruly anthology of Black American humor, edited by Damon Young.
So Damon's going to be on this upcoming season of Books on the Bed. But his publicist from Penguin actually hit me up.
Okay.
And that was the first time that happened. So that was pretty cool.
Great.
And she's like, yeah, what about an interview for this book? And it is such a needed, hilarious book. I mean, laugh out loud funny, even when you're alone. And I joked with Damon that I'm a hard laugh. Like, it's difficult to get me to laugh when I'm alone out loud. And this one just had me rolling.
Great.
But it's also really powerful and vulnerable. These authors do not they do not withhold anything. There's a lot about shame and grief and just really difficult.
Do you have a favorite entry in the book?
Oh. Well, okay, favorite non-actual essay or short story is the bit about presidents with Black names.
Okay.
It's a text message thread.
Okay.
So what's great about this, and you'll appreciate, there is no standard this book is trying to meet. There are texts, email chains, short stories, essays. I mean, it's just, there's so much freedom in this book, and you can tell they love making it together and Damon putting it together. So And then I really love Joseph Earl Thomas.
Right. Well, he is
and
one
God
of
bless
the...
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about God Bless You and Spunkmeyer. Yeah. So he has a bit
in there. And has a memoir as well that I enjoyed. Yeah.
Yep. So he's one of those stories, and Damon and I were joking. It's like you never know what's going to come out of Joseph Earl Thomas, and it's about a gorilla eating his father.
Okay.
So I'll leave it there.
All right. I thank you very much. I'm curious.
Yeah. So I figured you'd like that, and hopefully when you listen, you'll resonate with Damon's love of lists. So this one, very different direction.
All right.
This is a local North Carolina photographer and storyteller who's been in Madison County, north of Asheville, for 50 years now. I think he moved from D.C. or was it? Yeah, I think he moved from D.C. Yeah, you can.
Okay.
You can go ahead and open it so you can see what I'm talking about here.
Little Worlds by Rob Amberg. And I do not know this book and have never heard of it.
So this is the third book in a trilogy. The first one was Sodom Laurel, and the second was The New Road. And the New Road meaning I-26 when it cut through those mountains from Johnson City to Asheville. But Rob is an incredible photographer, really interesting artist. But the reason this book resonated, and I thought you would like it, is he's looking backwards 50 years since he moved there and forward 50 years into a post-apocalyptic North Carolina.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He wrote this and came out with this before the flood from Helene. And this is bad to joke about, but he jokes that he put it out there.
Right.
It was very prescient.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of that story that you have in the Ghost Variations where someone's growing in the past and in the future.
Okay. Yes.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a one-to-one, there was something about that 50 years backward and forward, even though he's, living right now, that just reminded me of that. But I think you'll enjoy his storytelling and his photographs.
Okay.
Yeah, the Little Worlds are, it's actually a children's story told to his daughter. So his daughter is in this book growing up. Throughout this entire book, photographs of his daughter at the start of these chapters. So I just feel like with time and mortality and a post-apocalyptic future, there was a lot in here that you would enjoy.
Yeah, very thoughtful. Thank you.
And then here's the third one.
Okay.
Which I could not remember if you had read, but I know we talked about this book because of you being the only other person who has read Barabbas. Yes.
Perlegerkvist. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that. I'm definitely pronouncing that with a very weird accent, but I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
But this was the other author.
Oh, Jesse Van Eerden. Okay. Right. Okay. Go ahead and tell me what you're going to tell me, and then I will segue into something.
Okay. Well, the reason I got this is because she chose Barabbas as one of her books on the bed.
Yeah.
And this is a very biblical essay collection, clearly with the Oak and Feather. She is an inventive, brilliant essay writer, one of the best people I know. I wish I could take a million classes with her. But I just know that you two would be able to talk books for hours and never get bored. She's super interesting.
Thank you. I have not read this collection either.
I'm glad.
Well chosen. I wish I had wrapped it. I've got a book for you as well, which it's very likely you already have, but on the chance that you don't, it's correspondence between your favorite writer and one of my favorite writers.
I don't have this book.
Okay.
I do not have this book.
This is the correspondence of Eudora Welty and William Maxwell. It's called What There Is to Say, We Have Said. Maxwell is a great favorite of mine. He's not on my stack to talk about today. But
I'm not
a very
about
important
that.
writer to me, and I know that Welty is a very important writer to you. So
this is so
there
great.
You go. Good.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. This has been referenced a lot, talking with people in Mississippi and other Welty writers, but there's a lot of Welty books, even that aren't the ones she's written. My brother got me a photography book about Welty on Faulkner.
Okay.
So, there's kind of all these different books that keep popping up, and I don't own all of them, so this is going to go on my Welty shelf.
Okay, good.
So I really appreciate this.
I think a fun book to dip into and out of.
Gosh, I love this.
Have you read Maxwell or much Maxwell?
The only one I've read is
So Long, See You Tomorrow? Okay.
Because
it's a beautiful book.
Ralph Eubanks
okay.
referenced that in my first podcast. And it's the intro to the episode because it was so profound, the passage that he chose. And I just remember him reading that and being like, wow, that's really freaking powerful. I can't believe I haven't read William Maxwell.
Yeah.
So that's the only one, but probably should read more.
He's great. He's an everything writer for me. So every book that is available, I have read.
That's a good good phrase to use. An everything writer.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how Wealthy is for me and Cather.
Yeah.
This is great. I love giving gifts, and I hope you enjoy those.
Yeah, I'm grateful. They're well-considered gifts.
Cool. So before we get to the books on the bed, there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about, because you have so much in your books and in your lists. There were so many different directions that we could go with this conversation that I just had to be like, you know what? All right, I got to pick something. But there was one thing in particular that stood out. It was this idea that, I think it was in your conversation with Karen. Mm-hmm. Are we telling the wrong stories?
Okay, yeah.
I was really fascinated by that, and it didn't get expounded upon. But when you were talking in the process of writing the Ghost Variations, which are short stories,
yes,
100 short stories.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a lot of restriction in that. And you had said, sometimes that makes me think like our novel's too long, right? and then you threw out that line about, that we might be, or we are maybe telling the wrong stories. So I'm curious about that sentiment.
Yeah.
And why writing that book maybe changed your mind about how we're telling stories.
So I don't know how completely expressed this idea is either in the interview with Karen or in the Ghost Variations. But I have a sense it's very easy to talk about literature, fiction in particular, as if the best books are the most human books. And I am deeply sympathetic to that idea. Certainly, I think that literature that possesses a richness of humanity is better than literature that possesses a more diminished form of humanity. But I'm not convinced that literature that possesses no humanity is worse than literature that possesses humanity. And it does sometimes seem to me as if constricting our imaginations to the human might be quite a straitjacket. I gave a craft talk maybe 5 years ago, and the writer ZZ Packer was in the audience. And the talk was about representing animal consciousness in fiction and how valuable that can be. And this is something I very much believe in. At the end of the talk, ZZ raised her hand to ask a question. And the question was about the differences between representing human consciousness and animal consciousness. And she couched it with a preface. What she said in preface was that the mystery of consciousness is the most profound mystery there is. And then she went on to ask her question. And I don't remember how I answered her question, but what I remember thinking about is, well, is consciousness the most profound mystery there is? And I don't think so. I think it's a profound mystery. But I think the most profound mystery there is why is there something rather than nothing? And second to that is probably, given the fact that there's something, is that okay or not okay? I would like to discover, as a reader, literature that addresses itself to those questions, fiction that addresses itself to those questions. And there's not much of it out there.
Have you found any, though, that satisfies that?
I found fiction that does it glancingly or that does it in part. I found very short pieces. There are a handful of 2-page stories in the Ghost Variations that took that as one of their aims. I mean, you cannot divorce. Fiction is a product of human consciousness, so it can't be divorced from the human. But it can nonetheless take as its subject something that is wholly non-human and that feels as if it's wholly unaffiliated with consciousness. And so I did have a handful of very short pieces that attempted to do that, but honestly, I think they're among the least successful pieces in the book. So this is a task that I think is very important, but I have not figured out how to do it.
Oh, what an aim, though.
Yeah.
So are you continuing to work at that?
I'm trying.
Is there something to be said for like trying too hard to do it?
Maybe so. And like there's something, the other problem that's baked into this mission is that it is simply a mission for which fiction is very poorly adapted. Every other art form is better suited to addressing those questions, I think, than fiction is. Because fiction, what it does best, what it does better than any other art form is revealing the intimacy of another consciousness.
Yeah.
And so to turn it to purposes that are wholly alien to that means that you're bucking against the baked-in possibilities of fiction. That doesn't mean it can't be done. I really admire fiction that turns itself to the purposes of song, for instance, or sculpture, or kind of other art forms.
Yeah.
But fiction that turns itself to the possibilities of sort of a human metaphysics or philosophy, it's very hard to find. I mean, you just call that philosophy. And usually it's not narrative, and usually it's very dry.
Yeah, this is and I'm so glad that we were talking about this because it just kept coming up. Like, I've read many of your books. I obviously looked at a lot of your interviews, and we were able to meet, so I kind of got a little bit of an idea of what you were about. And you know Jen, which already gave me the sense that you were thinking about high-minded questions, ones that are unanswerable in many ways. And her and I had this discussion yesterday about so much about what makes a book good is what are its concerns.
All right. I feel as if Piranesi, which, now, is Jen's episode going to air before mine?
I don't know yet.
I don't want to spoil her choices.
You won't. You wouldn't.
Okay.
Because who knows if people are going to listen to everything in succession anyway.
Okay.
But yeah.
In any case,
this is a good...
Yeah, I mean, Piranesi, again, is not among my six, although it's a book I really adore and have a lot to say about. And I know it's a valuable book for Jen. It does feel to me as if it's a work of fiction, a novel, whose concerns are not divorced from the human, but are very much in kinship with the metaphysical.
Yeah, the way she was describing it with this idea of there's a person who has no idea why they're here. And the waves coming crashing in.
Yeah.
And it's this huge house with all these hallways, and this person's only been in part of it.
All right.
Right? And I'm just sitting here, and even in the description, I'm oddly attracted to it because I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And neither does this person.
It's a very important book for me. And it felt to me as if it was one of those books that had been written for me and me alone. And it was quite surprising that it attracted such a huge audience.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you think it was about that?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think she's a very good writer. 3 books, that's it so far. But they're all very fine.
This one took 10 to 12 years or something?
It did. And it was... the product of a long period of illness and exhaustion for her. And you can see that inside the book. But maybe 3 or 4 years before Piranesi was published, one night I was falling asleep next to somebody. And I was in that weird space where you had started to dream, but you weren't yet incapable of communicating. And the person I was with began asking me questions about what I was doing and what I was perceiving. I didn't remember any of this, but when I woke up, she told me what we had talked about. And I said that I was in this sort of cavernous space that was nonetheless sort of illuminated from within, and that I was speaking to these figures that were frozen into their postures, and they were making demands of me. They were telling me what I could and could not do with my life. And I could disobey them, but if I did, I knew it would come at a cost. And so this anecdote, when it was being shared with me, I realized, oh my God, I would never have remembered this, but I have been visiting this weird sort of fantastic space and communicating with these figures all my life. I knew exactly what she was talking about when she told me that I had shared this story with her, and yet I never would have remembered it because it didn't happen when I was awake.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then I read Piranesi, and I felt like, oh my God, this is set in exactly that space. Like, how did she know? How did Susanna Clarke know? Is this a space that's accessible to other people? I presumed it was wholly interior, but it felt very real to me. And I knew that I had spent time there frequently over the years.
Then the question is, who else felt like this was their book because of that?
I don't know. I mean, I think many, many people adopted the book for various reasons. But yeah, again, like Piranesi, I mean, we might as well say that it was one of my six if we want to, because we've just spent time talking about it.
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't matter.
No, we can. This is what's great about this project.
Okay.
It's like, again, I always reference Charles Baxter.
Yeah.
I think the count was well over 50 books referenced.
Sure.
In that conversation, with his 6 being the main ones. That's kind of how it is. But I like dropping these other books because, 1, it shows the connection between authors and books they love. And 2, generates good conversation because, again, this was really important to me in coming to talk to you and like preparing for that.
Okay.
Like I was thinking a lot about what I wish you and Karen would have been able to just like give me I wish I had a private audience of you talking to each other. You both are fascinating minds. And that was just a sliver of what you would talk about, It just stuck with me.
Yeah.
And because this book stuck with me, I thought it was a really cool idea.
Thank you.
And the restrictions you gave yourself would be impossible for me. As you can tell, I'm verbose. It is the same in my writing. Because I'm not a writer, I don't ever put any restrictions on myself or anything. Should I? Probably. Do I? No. I love opposites of me. I would never do a book like this because I would feel like it's impossible. But you did this exercise, and it felt like there was so much you learned.
Okay.
Or things that you questioned.
Yeah.
And there was one thing that came up, again, in one of your answers with Karen, the idea that some greater unknown is basically my entire metaphysics.
Yeah, that's true.
And then you referenced Borges, and one of his lectures on English literature mentions Thomas Carlyle wrote about Samuel Johnson and his desire to see a ghost.
Yeah.
And I'm curious where the seeds of your interest in ghosts come from.
I've never had an experience with a ghost. I would love to, but it just hasn't been part of my life. I read something, somebody apparently, do you know Sarah Manguso? Okay. Now a novelist, she began as a poet and sort of really made her name as a nonfiction writer. But, has gravitated to different forms over the years. I guess somebody asked her about ghosts very recently, and she answered that she's never seen a ghost. She doesn't believe in ghosts. Even if she encountered a ghost, she's not sure she would believe in ghosts. She would believe in that ghost. And I liked that idea. So, I'm basically an agnostic, I am wholly aware that I'm immersed in mystery, the same way that everybody else is.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I was interested in writing about ghosts, well, first of all, the constraint preceded the book. Before I knew that it was going to be called The Ghost Variations and that it was going to involve 100 very short stories about ghosts, I knew that it was going to be 100 very short stories.
Okay.
That came first. And then I realized fairly quickly that I had 6 or 8 or 12 ideas for ghost stories that were ready to go. And I was convinced that I could come up with another 88 or whatever, and that it was kind of a malleable enough concept that I could use it for different purposes.
Yeah.
And one of those is just thinking about the differences between being and non-being, basically. I feel as if I wanted to write a book of fantasies that addressed itself in part to, Faulkner's famous Nobel Prize lecture. He says that all good literature is about the human heart in conflict with itself. There's a great writer named Adam Ehrlich Sachs. 3 books so far. They're all very fine. My favorite is called Inherited Disorders.
Oh, yeah, you've referenced this before.
I have, yeah. And this is a book of stories about sons and their fathers. And the fathers are always figures of profound accomplishment. And the sons always feel as if they exist in the shadows of their father's legacy. Every story is about exactly that. And he spins this through any number of variations.
Oh, that's cool.
And like, I appreciated kind of the humor and intelligence of the book. I really love it. I gave a reading with Adam, and he referenced that Faulkner quotation and said that he doesn't know what this has to say about his work, and maybe it's not literature. But Adam felt that his book was not about the human heart in conflict with itself. It was about the human brain in conflict with itself.
Yeah.
So I thought,
interesting.
Can I apply this to the ghost variations? And I sort of can. Like, I think what that book is about is, it's hard to phrase this correctly because human being has got a meaning already. Mm-hmm. I wanted to write a book that was not about the human heart in conflict with itself. It was not about the human brain in conflict with itself, but it was about being, like human being in conflict with itself. In other words, in a lot of ways, this book is about the idea that part of us addresses itself to being, part of us addresses itself to non-being, and we contain those two parts, and they're in dialogue and sometimes in tension with each other. And I wanted to see if I could find a way to write stories that took that as their theme, either on their surface or, buried somewhere underneath them. There's a quotation from Paul Valery that I really love. Mm-hmm. God made the universe from nothing, but the nothingness shows through. I love that.
Oh.
And so, I think, like, this is a book about kind of the somethingness of being in conflict with the nothingness of being.
I feel like, though, that's something that's evident in a lot of your work. Even in A Brief History of the Dead. Uh-huh. I think that's where part of my unsettled feelings came from. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was a kid, I would keep myself up at night wondering about what it would be like to exist in nothingness. Mm. Very young, which is a terrifying thing. And I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
And even my parents were like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
No, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, everybody, but in some ways.
It was the first time I'd thought about nothingness. Yeah. And it scared the shit out of me to think that, I wouldn't know anyway. Yeah. How could I be there if there's nothing? That's my first encounter with philosophy. Yeah. And so that conflict, I think, now that you're saying this, is part of why I'm so drawn to your writing.
I appreciate that. And
and you gave me language for it there that I couldn't quite describe, but it gave me the same feeling as when I was a kid pondering these questions. Right. Where I felt like completely.
And those questions are, of course, unanswerable. And yet, I feel as if everybody should be asking them all the time, that they're underneath every other question. Yeah. And I just don't understand why fiction so rarely broaches those questions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love this. Because I hadn't considered it until reading your work and preparing for this interview. No one else that I've encountered has been this direct about the lack of that in fiction. Uh-huh. And everything's so much about being human. Yeah. Human heart in conflict. Yeah. What it means to be a human being. Right. And of course that's important.
That is important and profound.
It's why I love so many writers.
Unquestionably, yeah.
Yeah, but there is something more there. And even just, what I love about your stories are how they take a moment, what could be a moment, and make it an eternity. Mm. One being where the man is staring out the window. Okay, yeah. At the same scene. Yes. And that's how the story starts. Yeah. But what you don't know is where it's going from there, and the fact that he can go to any scene from his life and look at it over and over again. Yeah. And then you obviously reference how that can dull the experience of it. Mm-hmm. Like, what if you were at the same place on Tuesday, March 3rd at 6:47 p.m. for 1 million times? Mm-hmm. What would that even be anymore? Mm. It's like that type of stuff. I'm like, God, shit, that's deep. Yeah. But you're taking a moment. Yeah. And you're like, well, what if you could have it all the time? Yeah. And these questions are sometimes unsettling, but I hope that I manage. My goal was not to have kind of a metaphysical lecture room of a book. I wanted a playground. That's what it was?
That's, and it happens to be a playground that addresses itself to these sorts of questions. But that's important to me. Like, literature is a form of play.
But it's what keeps the book moving. You keep wondering what variation is next.
Yeah.
What else are you going to play with?
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to think about ideas in anything, any type of storytelling, or even just life. How can I play with this idea? It's not how can I make people think differently necessarily. I think playing with something is going to make people consider something in a new light. And I agree with Karen about the story with the 2 pairs of glasses. It's just a genius thought, you know. You get two, you get one of them. It's like, well, what if I put another one over them? Like, it's just great. Now I see all these ghosts, and it's like, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
So I'm like, it re-energized me reading your books. I wasn't in a rut necessarily, but I can have a fairly predictable river of books that I'm floating in.
Yeah.
I do like similar types of novels, similar types of essay collections. And I think Jen is one of those people years ago that pulled me out with Tales the Devil Told Me. Yeah. She's very weird in the most wonderful way. And then when she told me about your books and I read them, it was just like, it's got me searching, in a new way for books. Yeah. I think you've helped me consider my own reading habits and where else might I go. So it was door opening in that way.
Thank you.
Or maybe, should I say, there's now all these hallways that I could go down, and that's exciting for me. So, but yeah, it's just, there was some deep shit in that book and Brief History of the Dead. And also, like, another unsettling thing was the frequency in which you bring up remembering things that are so inconsequential. And yet, why are those what happen? Why is it that you remember this very random thing that seems like it has no importance at all? Yeah. And that to me is also another unsettling thing. And you also have that quote of remembering things you want to forget and forgetting the things you want to remember.
Okay. Was this in the interview with Karen?
I think it was in one of the books.
Okay.
Sometimes I get things mixed up.
Yeah, I mean, so do I. So.
But there's just something about that I couldn't stop thinking about. Yeah. When all of these characters are drifting back to just these random things.
Right.
Is that something that happens to you often?
Oh, of course.
In Little Rock?
Yeah.
When you were 7?
Right, yeah. I mean, I've got one memoir. It's called A Few Seconds of Radiant Filmstrip. It's about 7th grade.
I love that book,
Thank you. So it begins on the first day of the school year, ends on the last day of the school year. There's an unusual middle chapter that feels non-realist, but otherwise kind of it's wedded as best I could to kind of the facts of my life. I was aware when I was writing that book that there was a certain journey I could take through the events of that year that was primarily anecdotal, and whose stories belonged to me and me alone, although I hoped other people would be able to appreciate them. But I also had a set of memories from that year that seemed minuscule, inconsequential, and divorced from my individuality. And yet they also offered a pathway through my life as it felt to me. And they didn't seem as if they were mine and mine alone. They seemed as if they could belong to anybody. So I might remember, we are talking right now in Little Rock in a space that is roughly 3 blocks from my elementary school. And
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think pretty frequently, for whatever reason, about this one afternoon during recess when, rather than playing soccer with my friends, I was sitting underneath a tree. And there's no anecdote attached to this. Like, it's not a story that's easy to tell, and yet it seems kind of soaked with my life. And so I wanted to write a memoir that had these 2 pathways through it, one of which was kind of anecdotal and individual, the other of which was non-anecdotal and non-individual, but both of which added up to my life as it transpired during that one year.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. Yeah. The one scene that stuck with me, and I don't know why, but was when in Brief History of the Dead, we're traveling back to, oh my gosh, what is her name? Who's stuck in...
Laura.
Yes.
Laura Bird.
And Laura's with her friend, and they're visiting this abandoned building in some park, right?
Okay.
Or they're about to wreck it.
Okay.
Right? There's a construction crew. It's the scene with the bee or the wasp that they're trying to get out.
Yeah.
And I have no idea why that's stuck with me so much. But I think it's because of this feeling I get where it's like, that could have been any of us at any time. Isn't that just life?
Yeah.
A million of those moments happening.
Yeah.
And I think it brings into focus just how little of our life matters to most people.
Sure.
What's so grand about it?
Yeah.
Well, the fact that it's all happening at all.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking of you here in Little Rock as a kid, and like, how many of those moments have happened around here? You know, it's like, it's the simplest stuff.
Yeah. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
As I was driving around and even coming here, it's even with Jen, right? Even though that's not necessarily something that sticks out in her writing, those types of moments, it's quite profound to think of how many memories you both have here and how much that's driven your writing. And so, yeah, I not that that's going anywhere, but it's something that's just, I think even also plays to the nothingness and somethingness of things.
Yeah. You know, occasionally, because I'm a writer and because I live in the South, you get the question, do you consider yourself a Southern writer?
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, what is your relationship to Southern fiction? And there are plenty of Southern writers whose work I adore.
Yeah.
I tend not to think of myself as, like, obviously in the mold of Southern fiction, as people usually describe it. But there was kind of an editorialist who wrote for the Arkansas Democrat and later the Arkansas Democrat Gazette for decades. Paul Greenberg was his name. And in one of his editorials, he was thinking about Southern fiction. If I had it at hand, I could kind of quote him more precisely. But he said that to him, like the distinguishing feature of Southern fiction was the way in which the Southern landscape was a necessity of the narratives. And I do sometimes write books in which the landscape is a necessary feature of the narratives, but often they're invented landscapes.
Yeah.
And it's really only in a few seconds of Radiant Filmstrip and in a handful of short stories that I'm writing about Little Rock as an identifiable place.
Which makes it even more interesting because of talking to Jen and how she is, you know, we've talked about this, where she has been rootless, even though she's from here. She doesn't set hardly anything in a landscape because it's like not something that she feels like she can do in the way that Flannery O'Connor or anybody else that's like so rooted in a place. It's like a hyper regional writer.
Right.
But that,
she borrowed Nashville for her last.
Yeah. And it just feels like, but maybe that's where Jen is able to flourish as a writer.
Yeah.
In the sense that she doesn't feel bound to any of these places. And not that that's wrong. It's not about, is it good or bad? It's just the ways that which your stories go.
Sure.
But it's that you're both from here. You both came back here.
Right.
And yet hardly any of your work is attached specifically to this place.
That's true.
And it doesn't make it any less unimportant. But you would think as a Southern writer, I mean, even look at Mud. I was down near DeWitt. Well, Jeff Nichols grew up around here. Of course he's going to do something about river rats in Arkansas.
Yeah.
But neither of you followed that sort of.
No.
Hey,
I mean, I think that's something
landscape.
we have in common. And the landscape of our imaginations is the landscape of other books. It's the books that we've loved the best.
Yeah.
The ones that feel most intimate to us.
Yeah.
And I suspect that she would agree with me about that. And there are other writers who seem to me as if they have adopted similar landscapes as their homes.
Well, maybe this is a good segue into the books on the bed.
Okay.
Speaking of landscapes of imagination and things that have inspired you, is there anyone that sticks out that you should start with?
Well, okay, I need to tell you first about the books that I disallowed myself.
Okay,
all right.
Let's do that.
So, I have got, we're sitting next to a bookcase that has got, my favorites, basically. It's maybe, 200, 225 books kind of crammed onto that case. I disallowed myself any book that any of your earlier books on the bed guests chose, which means that Catherine Savage ruled out Escapes by Joy Williams for me, even though I love that book.
I'm not surprised.
Meredith McCarroll ruled out The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers. Jerry Wilson ruled out The Things They Carried. Jessie Van Eerden ruled out Housekeeping, which I adore, and she was one of my teachers as well, Marilyn Robinson.
That's so cool.
Glennis Redmond ruled out Kindred, although really Kindred is on this case almost by accident, because I've got like a quality paperback book club sort of threesome that has Kindred, The Parable of the Sower, and Parable of the Talents.
Yeah.
And it's those other two that I really love.
Yeah.
She's another. So, I mean, Octavia Butler, Marilyn Robinson, those are both everything writers for me as well. Yeah. And Elizabeth Gonzalez James ruled out 2 books for me, Slaughterhouse-Five and The Collected Fictions of Jorge Luis Borges.
Yeah.
So it feels to me as if she and I have very similar imaginative landscapes. And Charles Baxter ruled out 2 books for me, The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov.
I was wondering if you were going to pick that.
And So Long, See You Tomorrow by William Maxwell. Yep. So again, it feels to me as if he and I have very similar imaginative terrains.
It is so interesting that you say that, because in the associations I make in my head, which are many and insane, and I usually don't verbalize because it doesn't matter to anybody. But this project, you start to make a lot of links between people.
Sure.
And books and landscapes, and like it's just a whole web of exciting connections that people may know they have with others or they don't.
Yeah.
And obviously you listening, you start to see this with some folks. Have you met Elizabeth Gonzalez James?
I have never met Elizabeth. I've met Charles.
Yeah.
And none of your others.
You 3 talking with you is a similar experience.
Okay.
Not the same experience.
Yeah.
But to me, you 3 in my mind are linked.
It's possible
in how you speak about books and life and the way you think. A friend of mine even texted me a few weeks ago who lives near me in Franklin, North Carolina, and she's like, wow, Elizabeth Gonzalez James is the most intellectual conversation I've listened to.
That's interesting. And I know that Jen knows Elizabeth Gonzalez James as well. And I will be interested to hear what Jen's 6 books are.
Yeah, and I think
and maybe you can tell me off mic, later on.
Yeah, totally. But it's funny because Elizabeth, I think even in that interview, I had mentioned that she had Tales the Devil Told Me on her bookshelf when we were doing it. And then yesterday, I saw The Bullet Swallower right next to me and Jen. Yeah. So, yeah, they're connected as well. Although I see them in a different web together. But there's something about you, Charles, and Elizabeth that is connected. So I'm not surprised they took 2 of your books. And I'm interested that you did that. No one else has done, at least verbalized it, that they've disallowed themselves.
And you had a couple writers who had Charles Portis books as well. He's got a very small bibliography. Like the Portis that's on my bookcase here is True Grit. Yep. But he's an everything writer for me, so I've read all those books. One of them had Masters of Atlantis, right? Is that right?
No.
Gringos?
Gringos.
Okay.
Yeah, Glenn
and
Taylor.
Dog of the South? Did somebody have Dog of the South? Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, Charles Portis has been quite... Although no one's picked the same book.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying, I'm sure people have listened or looked at the list and said, okay, I'm going to choose a different one. Like there's been 5 mentions of Toni Morrison. None of them have been the same book. Okay. Same thing with Lucille Clifton. So maybe people are doing that and not saying it, but it's interesting that you've actually written down and saying what you've disallowed. Yes. Which I do appreciate because it allows for us to, I'm sure these other books you've chosen will also be, be connected in some way. But looking at Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, that is one of the books that Damon Young chose.
All right.
Yeah.
And Damon's broadcast has not come on yet. So I could not have picked it, like, if I had known this.
Yeah, but he and Jerry could not be more different people.
Yeah.
Damon's a black man who grew up in Pittsburgh. Jerry's a 80-some-year-old white woman from Pontotoc, Mississippi. Okay. And yet they both had that book on there. Yeah. And the book's on the bed. So anyway, okay, that's good to start with. So what's number 1 on the actual books on the bed? Ooh, I knew. All right. I see the top one, and I knew that
You knew it was coming, yeah. I've got the first 5 ready to go, and then I'll figure out number 6. I wanted to begin with 2 books that I think of as totem books for me. They feel to me as if they kind of represent my humanity to myself. They're probably similar in a lot of ways, but the emotional tones differ. And the first of them is Italo Calvino. It's The Baron in the Trees, which is my favorite of his books. He is another everything writer for me. I think of him as the most significant novelist, the most significant writer of the 20th century. There's a wonderful interview with Gore Vidal, who was a very vinegary personality. You can look at this on YouTube. Like he was interviewed very late in his life about Calvino, with whom he had a friendship and whom he deeply admired. And in this interview, Vidal, who has basically used the interview as an occasion to shit-talk Norman Mailer and Ernest Hemingway, like, is suddenly asked about Calvino's death and how he responded when he heard the news that Calvino had died. And again, he has been dripping acid, Vidal has, for this whole interview. And suddenly he pauses and his eyes glass over. And you can see that, like, he's actually touched to remember this. And he says that his first thought when he heard Calvino had died was, when will there be another? With Calvino, I thought literature had died. And like, he has nothing good to say about 20th century literature.
Gives me chills. Except
for a handful of representatives. I don't know how much I have in common with Gore Vidal, but I agree with him that Calvino is, you know, for me, 20th century literature is a sky full of shining lights. But Calvino is the light that shines the brightest for me. The Baron in the Trees in particular, I often have a taste for melancholy fiction, grieving fiction. This is the opposite of that.
Interesting.
It's suffused with the joy of life. It reminds you of what a pleasure it is to be alive, or what a pleasure it can be to be alive. The first time I read it, it wasn't the first Calvino book I read. The first one I read was Cosmocomics, which is another of my great favorites. It's also on that favorites case. There are some writers who have multiple books on this case, and Calvino is one of them. But I was maybe 27.
Oh.
The first time I read The Baron in the Trees.
Okay.
Cosmocomics I read when I was a little younger, maybe 24. And I remember it was a Harcourt paperback copy. I've got a hardcover in front of me right now, which is a Christmas gift that my mom gave me maybe a dozen years ago, like a first edition hardcover, American hardcover of The Baron in the Trees.
I love that cover.
As a side note, there's the book I most covet in the world, like the individual copy of a book that I most covet in the world. There's a signed copy of The Baron in the Trees that has been available for like $5,000 on ABE Books forever. And it's inscribed by Calvino. And it says in Italian something like, "To Dolores who helped the Baron climb American trees." And then it has been translated into English alongside the inscription. And it was translated by the gentleman who went on to own the book, who was Henry Miller. And Henry Miller does not have the same import for me that Calvino does, but nonetheless, the provenance of that book is just amazing. So in any case, all right, so The Baron in the Trees, it is about an Italian nobleman of the 18th century who, at the age of 12, is served a dinner of snail soup that his sister prepared. He refuses to eat it. His parents say, "You're not going to get up unless you eat this soup." And he says, "If you try to make me eat this soup, I'm going to climb into the trees and I'm never coming down." So they try to make him eat the soup, and he climbs into the trees and he never comes down. So for the rest of his life, like, he's occupying, have you read The Baron in the Trees?
No.
Okay. He's occupying the kind of canopy of the Italian village in which he lives. And like he manages to live a life that is full of kind of love and anger and embattlement and reading and affection and everything that a life should be filled with. But he never sets foot on the ground. The first time I read this book, so there's an interview with Kurt Vonnegut. He was asked about his experience teaching at the Iowa Writers' Workshop, which he did very briefly in the 60s. He wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, like while he was living in Iowa City and teaching. And he says that one of the lessons he tried to give his students is that whenever somebody has an actual physical reaction to the book they're reading, it's a sign of great engagement, and it should be taken seriously. And he talks, Vonnegut does, about a story that one of his students wrote in which there was a character who had a little thread of dental floss stuck between her teeth. And he says that he read the whole story and was convinced that everybody else would read the whole story, tapping at the back of their teeth while they read it. And he said that, even if nothing else resonated with him, the fact that the story inspired that physical reaction in him was a sign that it was doing something important and speaking in some deep way to him. The first time I read The Baron in the Trees, I was so delighted by some passage that I ran across. I can't even tell you now what the passage was, but I was so delighted by it that I cackled out loud, kissed the pages of the book, and kept reading. And maybe 3 or 4 more pages went by, and I thought, wait a second. Like, did I just do what I think I just did? Because it was a wholly unself-conscious gesture. Like, it was just complete immersion and pleasure.
Yeah, no one, consciously says, I'm going to do that.
No.
In reaction to anything.
No.
So you know it's real.
Right.
That is so funny.
It was absolutely real, and I barely retained the fact that I did it. But, somehow I retained it long enough to realize what I had done. And the book, I think, offers so much joy. It's good to have examples of books that bring joy into your life. Calvino's fiction does that for me. And The Baron in the Trees in particular, more than any other Calvino book, fills me with joy.
I'm getting chills as you talk about this.
Have you read other Calvino?
No.
Okay.
And both you and Jen have picked a Calvino book.
What was Jen's Calvino? Can you tell me? Or
the folktales.
The folktales. Also wonderful. Also
I saw it on
this
your
bookcase. Yeah.
And she read that when she was 9.
Wow.
Because her mom did not inhibit her from reading any book. It was just free reign.
Yeah.
But Jen mentioned that she just remembered immersing in the stories without knowing anything about the writing because she was so young.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that had an outsized impact later in life when she was writing that she didn't even know about.
All right.
So...
So Calvino's, the Italian Folktales was the first Calvino that Jen read.
Yeah.
It was the final Calvino that I read.
Wow.
I had read, there have been some stray books published since then.
Yeah.
But I had read his entire bibliography, basically, and thought that, with most writers, the books you read first are the best known, and they're probably the best. There's a reason that they're the best known.
Sure.
In Calvino's case, I never knew which of his books was going to be among my favorites. Yeah. I presume that Italian folktales would be a lesser effort because it's just, it's fairy tales, it's retellings. They weren't original to him. But no, I think it's one of his very best books. It had a pretty deep impact on me when I read it too.
Yeah.
There are a handful of books that I wrote for a collection called The View from the Seventh Layer that are called, they all have the word fable in the title. And they were written under the sway of Calvino's Italian folktales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah, it's so cool when these connections happen. But I am curious, as another person who, both with books and movies, I love some sad shit. Mm-hmm. I am a just sucker for it.
Yeah, me too.
I just love melancholy.
All right.
I love anything that feels somber, looks somber, because often it's the stuff that makes me think the most about how I live. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that inverse where the sad stuff also makes me want to pursue joy.
Yeah.
in like just a different way.
Yeah.
But then you come across certain books that you're like, that I needed this opposite experience where it's not dwelling at all in what's sad and melancholy in that mood. I'm curious, though, why this one, of all the books that gave you joy, happened to be the one that you had this literal physical reaction to.
I mean, I do feel as if there is some kind of deep human and artistic kinship between... I share something with Calvino. Like, he feels like a really intimate writer for me.
Okay.
There are other writers I admire very much, you know, even adore, who just don't feel to me as if we're occupying the same world quite. Calvino does feel to me as if he's occupying my world. Like, there are aims I have for myself as a writer that sometimes I can't figure out how to fulfill. And I'll realize that there was a moment in Calvino's life when he had the same aim as a writer and couldn't figure out how to fulfill it. In the book I'm reading, and that means so much to me, it's the result of his failure to fulfill that aim.
Wow.
It's like... So what we were saying earlier about kind of metaphysical fiction and fiction that divorces itself from the human to think about the conflict between somethingness and nothingness. If you read Calvino's Mr. Palomar, it feels to me as if this is a book in which it's the result of his desire to write that same kind of book. And he wasn't able to do it. I'm not able to do it either, or at least I haven't figured out yet. But this was the book that came about as he pursued that aim. It's like the shell without the creature inside it, right? And the shell is still beautiful, even if it's not inhabited.
I don't know why this is coming to my mind, but I remember talking with John T. Edge in Mississippi about the origins of, you know, the word essay as a result of an attempt.
Sure. Yeah.
And you're just trying something when you're writing an essay.
Yes.
And as you're speaking, it's like even the result of an attempt to fulfill this aim is beautiful and powerful and great, right? So it's like you didn't quite get there, and yet isn't that what all writers are trying to do? And then even if you still don't get there, you still might have written something awesome.
Right. I mean, I think that is very much the case.
I mean, I guess that's how I would feel about Ghost Variations too.
Yeah.
You know, whether your aim was met or not, holy shnikes, man. It's like, an aim was met.
I want that to be the blurb on the cover of my next book. Holy shnikes, man. It's like Matt Sawyer.
Hey, I will be glad to serve it, you know, as the non-literary representative of blurbs. But yeah, so that's oh gosh, that's so cool. I knew this was going to be the number one because you could not have Calvino in it.
Oh no, I mean, he's way too important to me.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, I could have rounded out a list of Calvinos.
Yeah.
You know? Well, I was trying to convince Jen Fox to offer you 6 Kevin Brockmeier
Oh
books.
my gosh, that would have been so funny. Yeah. I would have actually allowed it.
Yeah.
Because I'm actually surprised nobody has taken the liberty to do something way left field like that. Like, hey, here's a bunch of books that are 100 pages or less.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've got a good list of my favorite books that are under 100 pages.
Yeah, of course you do. I love the one you have 10 about eating people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You have so many good lists. But it's interesting that some people have like, I remember Ramika Bingham-Risher, there was one book she gave, Toni Morrison's Home, because it was small. Hey, you're traveling. I would want you to have this because it's small. And I'm sure other people have picked Beloved, things like that. But no one's just had like some random idea to say, yeah, I'm just going to do a bunch of Charles Baxter books because he's my favorite author. Yeah. So anyway, that would have been really cool if she did that.
What I like is the idea of doing 6 books about eating people and pretending that I don't realize it's what I've done. Oh like, you have to point it out to me. It's like, what?
Yeah, could you, you want to explain?
I had no idea.
Is everything okay? Oh, that's so good. Well, is there anything else you want to mention about
Yes.
Baron in the Trees?
The one thing I wanted to point out is that we're sitting beneath a piece of artwork that is constructed from Calvino's The Baron in the Trees. That's it right there.
It's an incredible work.
Right. This is a sculptor. I can find her name. Her book. Let's see.
Blackwell?
I'm going to wander away from the microphone.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I love this.
Okay, let me find it. Book sculpture. Sue Blackwell is her name.
Okay.
S.U. Blackwell.
Yeah.
So, if you wanted to...
Yeah, keep talking.
Yep. Okay. So Sue Blackwell, S.U. Blackwell, is the artist's name. And what she does is kind of find old copies of books and make kind of sculptural paper art out of their pages that represents the content. That's made from a copy of The Baron in the Trees.
Idea.
Yeah. And so, maybe you could include a photo of that work.
Totally.
I bet you can find it online. In fact, you can find it on my website. Like I've got a list of my, a list of kind of, I think 5 pieces of a Calvino-inspired artwork that's somewhere in my home.
You do.
Okay. So you can just borrow the image from there if you want to include it with the podcast.
Oh my gosh, I love when that happens.
Okay. So The Baron in the Trees, I feel as if that is a book that represents me to myself when I feel at home in the universe. I don't always feel at home in the universe. And the book that represents me to myself when I don't is The Man Who Fell to Earth by Walter Tevis.
I knew Tevis was going to be in here too.
Yeah, he's another writer who's very important to me. Did Jen talk about Tevis as well? She did. Okay. Another everything writer for me. He had a limited bibliography. I believe 6 novels and a story collection, maybe 7 novels and a story collection. Basically, he wrote, half of his work were stories of gamesmanship. And like The Hustler, The Color of Money, and The Queen's Gambit would be those books. And the other half was like a very intimate form of science fiction. And those would be The Man Who Fell to Earth, Mockingbird, and The Steps of the Sun. He also published some stories. While he was alive, there was 1 volume of his stories printed. But very recently, Vintage published the complete short stories of Walter Tevis. The title is, I Believe the King is Dead. And my affection for Tevis was well known, and I ended up writing the introduction.
Oh, that's so cool.
I was grateful to be asked to write the introduction to that book because his work is very important to me.
That's got to be one of the coolest things you've done, right?
It was great. And his surviving family kind of reached out to me after they read the introduction and said that it was meaningful to them and they thought that it was kind of the best thing people had written about Tevis. And they sent me a copy of like a first edition of The Queen's Gambit.
How special.
Yeah. Very nice.
I need to read that now.
Yeah. Start maybe with The Man Who Fell to Earth. If you've got any taste for science fiction, this is the one that I would recommend. Although, like among writers and readers who love Tevis, there's no consensus favorite.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people adore The Queen's Gambit. A lot of people adore Mockingbird. The Hustler has got kind of its partisans. But The Man Who Fell to Earth is a deeply melancholy book. It was adapted into the David Bowie movie in the 1970s. It's a very good movie, but the tones are very different. It's sort of like a 70s drug freakout version of the same story. The Bowie movie is.
Okay.
The Tevis book was published in, I believe, 1959, maybe. More than a decade earlier, at least.
Even physically, this book feels melancholy.
63. Yeah. So The Man Who Fell to Earth is the story of, essentially, I think of it as like what would have resulted if Graham Greene had turned his hand to science fiction. It has a very kind of classical aura to it. And it's the story of an alien who travels to Earth for specific purposes. Like his planet is undergoing an apocalyptic drought. And so he's sent as a kind of scout, to find out whether the water resources of Earth can be turned to the purposes of Anthea, which is the name of the planet he's from. He is stranded on Earth. And It's a book about an alien who slowly discovers his humanity and thereby loses his soul.
Whoa.
And it has one of what I think of as the most beautiful and potently melancholic endings I've read in any work of fiction, certainly in a work of science fiction. And I'm going to go ahead and spoil this,
sure.
Just to kind of share the text with you. But the character's name is Newton, and he has turned to drink because decades have gone by, and he now realizes he's never going to be able to return home. A lot of Tevis's books are veiled investigations of what it's like to grapple with addiction and sometimes recovery, which was a big problem of his own. He had a great early success with The Man Who Fell to Earth and The Hustler, and then roughly 20 years worth of non-productivity.
Wow.
That were lost to drinking and teaching. And then he returned and wrote another 4 novels before he died fairly young. But this is kind of the very end of The Man Who Fell to Earth. And he is having a conversation with a man named Bryce. And Bryce is asking him if there's anything he can do to assist him. They're sitting together in a bar, and Newton has been drinking quite a bit. Because of the dark glasses, Bryce could not see Newton's eyes, but it seemed to him as though Newton were looking everywhere. "Easy come, easy go, Nathan," he said. "Easy come, easy go." Newton began to tremble. His angular body began to lean forward, and the felt hat fell silently onto the table, showing his chalk-white hair. Then his Anthean head fell onto his spindly Anthean arms, and Bryce saw that he was crying. For a moment, Bryce stood quiet, staring at him. Then he walked around the table and, kneeling, laid his arm across Newton's back and held him gently, feeling the light body trembling in his hands, like the body of a delicate, fluttering, anguished bird. The bartender had come over, and when Bryce looked up, the bartender said, "I'm afraid that fellow needs help." "Yes," Bryce said. "Yes, I guess he does."
Cool.
So that's the last, few paragraphs of The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Wow.
And I think it's an example of science fiction fulfilling the highest purposes of literature. It is suffused with humanity. It reminds you how it feels to be alive. The prose is remarkably artful. It's very restrained in Tevis's case. Like, it's not showy prose.
Yeah.
But that is a form of artful prose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the book that I most frequently recommend to readers of literary fiction who tell me that they don't really understand the flavor of science fiction or why anybody would enjoy reading it. Yeah.
I get that. Not necessarily why anyone would enjoy it, but I have a hard time because I was so inculcated with literary fiction.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I read, and poetry after that I never knew where to start with science fiction.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you selected one that you would say is good for people that like literary fiction, because I bet a lot of people will appreciate hearing that and then maybe say, all right, let me give it a try.
Yes. Yep. So Tevis, as you know, I've got an affiliation with the Iowa Writers Workshop. I studied there. I teach there pretty frequently. Tevis is he was there, like in the very late 50s.
Interesting.
So, Flannery O'Connor preceded him there. There have been a lot of writers who have emerged from this
pretty
space.
Remarkable.
Tevis is the one whose work has been most meaningful to me. So, I've got somewhere on my website is a list of my favorite books by Iowa Writers Workshop graduates. Mm-hmm. And I disallow any of my own classmates, any of my own students, any teachers alongside whom I have taught or any of my own teachers.
Okay.
Right? So, I mean, because I don't want to wound anybody's feelings.
Yeah.
Right?
You're very kind. But Tevis is...
Tevis is, The Man Who Fell to Earth in particular, but really almost any of his books. Like the others that are on my favorites case here are Mockingbird and The Queen's Gambit. But like I love his entire body of work.
Yeah.
And if you develop the taste for him, I would not be surprised if he becomes an everything writer for you as well. Yeah, he's very, very rereadable too.
Well, I'll give it a shot.
Give him a shot. Yeah.
Because if you're saying that, then it's probably true. So I'm excited because even just that passage, and this is why I love when people read, because then I can get a sense of, could I find myself, even just with that little bit, enjoying that type of writing? And good golly.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly the type of ending I look for.
Let me share the beginning as well. There's an immediacy to this. Like sometimes science fiction is a sink or swim proposition.
Okay.
Tevis is not that way. Like he's very gentle with you as a writer. After 2 miles of walking, he came to a town. At the town's edge was a sign that read Haneyville, population 1,400. That was good, a good size. It was still early in the morning. He had chosen morning for the 2-mile walk because it was cooler then, and there was no one yet in the streets. He walked for several blocks in the weak light, confused at the strangeness, tense and somewhat frightened. He tried not to think of what he was going to do. He had thought about it enough already. So it's not, it's just, there's an immediacy to it. The character whose consciousness the book mainly adopts is this Enthean alien who ends up going by the name Newton. And his body is not particularly well suited for our planet. So it presents him with a number of horrors that it would not present most ordinary people with. For instance, he finds it very difficult to ride in an elevator because the differential, the sudden air pressure differential, really bothers him. The ways in which his body mysteriously fails him is another way in which the book seemed important to me and as if it had something to say to me about my own life when I was reading it. Because there was a stretch of very peculiar ill health that I endured. And I wasn't looking for books that spoke about that, but I would find them every so often. And it made me remember that I wasn't entirely alone in the world. And I'll have more to say about that idea, like with a book I'm coming to. I mean, I guess 2 books from now. But I did write a novel that was an attempt to grapple with what it felt like to be at war with your own body. And it was The Illumination. That's a book about what happens to the world and to 6 particular characters when people who are in pain begin to generate light so that you can see when the people around you are suffering. It basically equates pain with light and with beauty. And you spin that idea around on itself for kind of 250 pages and try to verbalize it. And this was the book that resulted.
Wow, it's interesting to see that connection here. Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
And I think it's true. It's such an important moment to find those books. Not that you're ever searching for them.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of what this tattoo comes from.
What does the tattoo come from?
Where the roots reach for water.
Okay.
Personal and natural history of melancholia.
Okay.
And it's by a one-and-done author, Jeffrey Smith.
Okay.
Who grew up in Southeast Ohio. And
is he your favorite one and done? Is it your favorite one and done book?
I mean, as far as impact on my life, it has to be.
Okay.
And he just disappeared. He just lives in Southeast Ohio still.
Okay.
I have no idea what he's doing, but he wrote this as an exploration of his own depression, but using the term melancholia so he can explore its ancient origins and, treatments and all of the ways that it's manifested in people. But it was really something to read a personal and natural history of something at the same time. And it starts with him in Montana, where he's in graduate school, and he's been doing well. And then all of a sudden, he calls depression Mr. Shoulder. And Mr. Shoulder comes back. He's at a party with his girlfriend and all these friends, and he's like, oh shit. You know, he just felt it. He felt the weight come back. And then, because it's come back, he devises a plan to drown himself with a bag of rocks in the Clark Fork River. That's how the book begins. And then it's, how do I deal with this without ending it? Like, what do I do? Like, it's just so depressing to feel good for a period of time, to find something that works, and all of a sudden, here it is again. And so this was embossed on the cover in silver, and it was something. And in fact, I lost my first copy. I left it in the Minneapolis St. Paul airport, the paperback, and then I went back to the same bookstore, Midway Books in St. Paul, and found the hardcover that had this under the sleeve. And it was such an important book for me to read when I could not fucking figure out how to live and enjoy it and do well. I was lost. I was like, I can't, medication isn't going to work. It's like, I don't need therapy. I need something else. I need more ideas of how to figure this out. And that was the roadmap. That whole book was him exploring all of these different ways that he could get better and enjoy life. And the main portion of that book that really resonated was when he went to see it was some sort of conference or forum. And I believe it was James Hillman that said, depression is a hidden knowledge. And for a lot of people, that sounds insane. Like, oh, just shut up, you know. But that stuck with him. And it bothered him that it stuck with him, because he's like, oh, that's hokey. But same thing with me. When I read that, I was like, that's an interesting idea.
Have you been able to correspond with the writer? Is he findable?
No.
Okay.
I tried to reach out to his publicist at Macmillan, but this book is so old. I mean, he's done nothing else since. I have no idea how to get in touch. But nonetheless, it's like that type of book where I was just browsing, very sad one day in St. Paul, very lonely. And then I just kept reading this book and kept saying, like, wow, God, this could not have been more perfect.
Okay, let me recommend a book for young readers that is one of the most successful representations of depression and its effect on the body that I've ever read. And certainly the most successful book for an audience of that age. It's called The Reappearance of Sam Weber by Jonathan Scott Fuqua.
Okay. I've never heard of this book.
Take a look at it.
Definitely.
I don't hear people talking about it very often. It was published.
Well, that's good. We need to put it out there.
Maybe 23 years ago, something like that.
I'll need to remember to at least attach that to this episode and the website, you know? Because again, this is what I talked about. It's more than just the 6 books on the bed. It's what else comes to mind and what else is not well known enough that could help somebody or give somebody joy, you know? So I'm appreciative of that. But anyway, it just reminded me with you talking about that recognition in a book and feeling unalone now.
As a fellow admirer of Charles Baxter, who is a fellow admirer of William Maxwell. Baxter has got an essay about Maxwell's So Long, See You Tomorrow, and which is a very short book, maybe 120 pages long. And Baxter says about So Long, See You Tomorrow that you get the sense reading this book that Maxwell has given away more of what was most intimate to himself than authors often do in novels of many hundreds of pages. And this is an aim that I think, it's not the only sensible artistic aim, but it's a good one. And I think the books in which I have tried to give away what was most intimate to me have been the books that have been most valuable to the people who've read me. And a book like The Man Who Fell to Earth, like, even though it is adopting the forms of non-realism, nonetheless feels like an effort on Tevis's part to give away what was most intimate to himself.
That. I agree. I tend to like the books that feel that way. Because isn't that what we're all looking for?
Sure.
You know, and it helps engender more of that vulnerability.
Yeah.
I think in everyday life in people, when you see that an author can do it, it's like, wow, there's something to that. Maybe I should try it. Maybe there's more connection to be had there.
Yeah.
God, I love that.
Yep.
Oh, those are two incredible starts.
Good.
Oh. So do you have the third that you want to talk about?
Book number 3. Book number 3 is called Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars. It's by Daniel Pinkwater. I mean, I've got several copies of this book. The one that's in front of me is a compendium of his books called 5 Novels, which also contains Slaves of Spiegel, The Snark Out Boys and the Avocado of Death, The Last Guru, and Young Adult Novel. So Daniel Pinkwater writes for children. He's still alive.
Wow.
When I was in 4th grade, in my school library, I found Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars. And there were a couple novels that I read that particular year that made me feel recognized in a way that I just didn't know books could do. I had I was in 4th grade, but like much of my reading up to that point had been comics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I grew up loving comics. I still love comics. My allowance money, usually I would spend it on comic books. But when I was in 4th grade, Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars by Daniel Pinkwater was a great discovery for me. It was a book that I read and forgot a number of times over the years. I would remember having loved this book. I wouldn't quite remember what the title was. And then I would stumble across it again and I would realize, oh, this is the book that I remember loving so much. And I would reread it and I'll be damned if I didn't continue to love it.
Yep.
So I was maybe about 25 or 26. I had just finished graduate school and moved back to Little Rock. And I was in a bookstore and I saw this very peculiar looking book called 5 Novels by Daniel Pinkwater. I thought, what on earth is this? I didn't recognize the writer's name.
Yeah.
But I cracked it open and I saw Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars.
Oh,
boom.
my.
And I remembered, okay, this is the book I loved so much when I was 10 years old. And I bought it and I reread it. And it's every bit as good as I thought it was when I was 10 years old. So that was a very pleasurable discovery.
Yeah.
Like that the book still contains its magic.
Yeah.
Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars is about a boy named Leonard Niebel who a new student joins his class, and that student's name is Alan Mendelsohn. And Alan Mendelsohn eventually begins telling his classmates that he's not actually from Earth, he's from Mars. His classmates doubt him and end up tussling with each other about who believes Alan Mendelsohn and who disbelieves Alan Mendelsohn. But it's a book that has a particular brand of familiar strangeness that felt to me as if it was kind of hitchhiking across my own imagination. It just felt to me like, oh, this is a book. Reading this book feels to me as if I'm daydreaming. Like, this is what happens when I let my mind pursue its own devices.
That's a good feeling.
Right? He's a very funny writer. He usually writes about fairly ordinary boys, almost always boys, who, are roughly between the ages of 9 and 13, and whose worlds suddenly crack open and present oddity and fantasy to the fairly ordinary lives of these fairly ordinary kids. And the ways in which he captures the cadences of their voices and the things that they find interesting felt very intimate to me.
Yeah.
So here's the first kind of paragraph or two of Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars by Daniel Pinkwater. I got off to a bad start at Bat Masterson Junior High School. My family had moved from my old school district during the summer, and I didn't know a single kid at the school. On top of that, it turned out that kids at Bat Masterson put a lot of emphasis on how you look. This created a problem. I am a short, portly kid, and I wear glasses. Every other kid in the school was tall, had a suntan, and none of them wore glasses. Also, clothes wrinkle up on me. I don't know why this should be. 5 minutes after I get dressed in the morning, everything is wrinkled. It looks like I slept in my clothes. Not only did I not know anybody on my first day, not only did I find out that a short, portly, wrinkled kid with glasses is an outcast in that school, but I also sat down on somebody's half-finished good humor bar in the schoolyard. That reduced my confidence. Then it turned out that the school was not expecting me. My records and grades and whatever the old school was supposed to send, they had not sent, or they had sent them to the wrong place, or they had gotten lost. So I had to sit on this bench in the office for most of the morning, sort of sticking to the bench because of the leftover good humor on the seat of my pants. Finally, they gave me this big pile of cards to fill out. Then I had to run all over the school, getting teachers to sign the cards. 3 or 4 times I had to go back to the office with notes from teachers saying that their class was full, or it was the wrong class, or it conflicted with another class I was supposed to take. And each time I entered a classroom, the class would giggle at me. Then the teacher would ask my name. It was written right at the top of every one of the cards, but the teacher would ask me to say it anyway. Leonard Niebel, I would say, and the kids in the class would just go wild. I don't know why, but my name gets them every time. So all of his narrators possess these very down-to-earth speaking voices, and no matter what kind of strangeness with which they're presented, they talk about them as if they're wholly ready to convey these experiences as if they were just kind of blending into the textures of their ordinary school days.
I like that.
Yeah. I like his work very much. He's written maybe 85 or 90 books.
What?
Like many of them kind of very short.
Still, that's...
And, you know, some of them illustrated. So he's not an everything writer for me because there's just too much stuff out there. But I've read all of what I would think of as his novels. And, like, I could make an easy top 5.
So he's an everything novelist, basically.
Yeah, I guess he's an everything novelist for me, but not quite an everything writer.
Yeah.
You know, he is adored by people like Jules Feiffer and Kurt Vonnegut and, you know, I mean, lots of hippie eccentrics from the 60s felt that kind of their worldview was being represented in the world of children's literature when Daniel Pinkwater began writing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm so pleased when people bring in children's books and talk about their experience in libraries or bookstores.
Yeah.
Spent some of yesterday talking about publishers and how important that was in Little Rock up to the 90s when it went away, and, you know, going to the library, and even how important, you know, like this English teacher was to Jen's mother in St. Charles. Very desolate place. I mean, so it's like, you know, libraries and bookstores, and especially for children, can be the place of dreams, you know, and can be a place of huge comfort when you don't know where else to get it. So it's really important that we keep talking about these experiences. No matter how old you get, you have those formative moments where it's like, here's this place where I found this thing.
Yeah. Yep.
And it changed everything.
Yep.
I love it.
Yep. And Daniel Pinkwater was one of those writers for me, you know, and remains one of those writers.
Yeah.
He's still working, still publishing. His latest book came out just a few months ago, I
love
think.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Hey, that's the thing about writers, you know, and I like when people writers try their hand at different kinds of writing. Don't just stop at the novel.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we can do.
Yep.
So that's really cool.
Yeah. But not on my stack here. But the other book I discovered that same year is much better known, Super Fudge by Judy Blume. And Judy Blume was, you know, everybody was reading Judy Blume when I was a kid. Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary.
Yeah.
Like I sort of think of them in the same breath. But Super Fudge in particular, it's a sequel to Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. You know these books, at least by reputation. Yep. Yeah. And, you know, the narrator is maybe in 5th grade by the time Super Fudge begins. And there's a moment in that book, his name is Peter, and he's standing in line at a movie theater, and he's directly behind the girl on whom he has a crush. Mm-hmm. The wind is blowing, and this girl's hair is kind of blowing into his face and tickling his face. And he doesn't know what to do because he's enjoying it so much. He's afraid that if he calls the girl's attention to it, she'll apologize and it will no longer be happening. This is just a paragraph in the book. But I read this and I thought to myself, how did she know? Like, that sounded exactly like my life as I experienced it.
Wow.
And I would have guessed that it was wholly secret to me and that nobody else understood it.
Wow.
And yet she did. And occasionally I'll discover, at least once a year, if not more frequently, I'll discover another book that seems to contain the secrets of my life and reminds me that I'm not wholly isolated and that I'm sharing the world with other people who know what it's like to experience the things I do.
Gosh.
The next book on my stack is an example of that.
Oh.
And this is Turtle Diary by Russell Hoban. And this was published in either the late 70s or the very early 80s, but I only discovered it within the last decade. 75 it was published.
Wow.
Okay. So Hoban is best known for two things. He wrote the illustrated Francis the Badger books for very small kids. And also he wrote lots of fiction for adults, but he wrote a particular book called Ridley Walker, which is a post-apocalyptic novel set some centuries, if not millennia, after the cataclysm, and written in a much altered, changed, or degraded version of the English language that seems almost indecipherable for a page or two, and then you get the hang of it, and it begins to feel natural to you. That's the novel of his for which he's best known. It's a great book. But Turtle Diary, I think, is just as fine and more important to me. And it's a book with kind of two narrators, a man and a woman. The woman is a children's novelist. The man is a bookseller. They're both living in the United Kingdom, where Hoban, he's American, but like he spent much of his life living in the United Kingdom. And the plot, such as it is that these two characters come together, discover that the sight of the sea turtle in the London Zoo fills them with a sense of melancholy and grief, and determine to swipe the turtle from its enclosure and free it into the ocean. So, like, that's the plot.
Wow.
But it's not really a book about its plot. It's about what it feels like to be a human being, and these particular human beings. And I've marked two of the pages, one from the man's point of view and one from the woman's point of view, that I read and thought to myself, how does he know? And let me read those to you. Okay.
I can't wait for this.
So the man's name is William G. And he says, this is maybe a sixth of the way into the book. What a weird thing smoking is, and I can't stop it. I feel cozy, have a sense of well-being when I'm smoking, poisoning myself, killing myself slowly. Not so slowly, maybe. I have all kinds of pains I don't want to know about, and I know that's what they're from. But when I don't smoke, I scarcely feel as if I'm living. I don't feel as if I'm living unless I'm killing myself. Very good. Wonderful. I don't smoke. Like, that's not the part I identify with, but this next passage. One time I grew a beard. I didn't want to see my face in the mirror anymore while shaving, so I stopped shaving. I'd already stopped looking at myself when brushing my teeth and washing my face, and I used to comb my hair without a mirror, feeling the parting with my fingers. It was a relief at first, but when the beard reached a state of full growth, I was constantly aware of walking around behind it, so I got rid of it. Since then, I've had to see my face almost every morning. I don't shave on my Saturdays off, nor on Sundays unless I'm going out in the evening. I used to think when I shaved and looked at my face that that bit of time didn't count, was just the time in between things. Now I think it's the time that counts most. It's those times that all the other times are in between. It's the time when nothing helps, and the great heavy boot of the past is planted squarely in your back and shoving you forward. Sometimes my mind gives me a flash of road I'll never see again. Sometimes a face that's gone. Moments like grains of sand, but the beach is empty. Millions of moments in 45 years. Letters in boxes, photos in drawers. So breakfast is a useful thing, a rallying point for all the members of me. We all sit together at the table by the window to start the day off. My face comes along as well.
Oh.
So that's William G. And the woman's name is Naira H, spelled Neaera. I don't know how it's pronounced, but we'll say Naira H. And she is the children's novelist. And I'm going to read a couple paragraphs from one of her chapters of the book. This is maybe halfway through. On the morning when the letter came, I was thinking that possibly the biggest tragedy in children's literature is that people won't stop writing it. It was one of those mornings when there suddenly seemed nothing whatever that could be taken for granted. I felt a stranger in my own head, as if the consciousness looking out through my eyes were some monstrous changeling. Here was the implacable morning light on all the books and litter that were always there, but nothing was recognizable as having significance. What in the world was it all about? I found myself wondering. People write books for children, and other people write about the books written for children. But I don't think it's for the children at all. I think that all the people who worry so much about the children are really worrying about themselves, about keeping their world together and getting the children to help them do it, getting the children to agree that it is indeed a world. Each new generation of children has to be told, this is a world, this is what one does, one lives like this. Maybe our constant fear is that a generation of children will come along and say, this is not a world, this is nothing, there's no way to live at all. This is a book that's filled with passages like that. They don't support the plot, right?
Don't matter. If you're writing like that, I'm in.
Right. I mean, they're just observations about what it's like for these two characters to experience their humanity. Hoban is smart enough not to allow a romance to develop between the characters. It's not about that. It is about characters seeking community. There are characters in the book who experience love and romance, but it's not the two of them with each other. And I think that's a very important feature of the book as well, because it can be easy to imagine that all our stories are love stories, and that therefore this book needs to reflect that side of our experience. I don't know that that's the case, and I was grateful when reading this particular book that it didn't borrow what seemed to me to be kind of the easiest possible locus of interest for a story like this. I was expecting that to happen, and it didn't.
Well, and I think this is interesting in how so many stories reflect how we live. Mm-hmm. And the significance, almost ridiculous weight, society places on that kind of romance. Mm-hmm. And books and movies milk that as much as they possibly can.
Yes.
And yet, you're always wondering, I think anybody that's experienced romance and heartbreak and all this is like, is this it?
Yeah.
and how great it is to find stories that reflect all the other possibilities of relationships that don't end in love, like romantic love.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is that two people can have this experience, even very meaningful experiences together, and that never enters into the equation. I think too often, whether it's because they think it's going to sell better, or maybe that's just how they're inclined, because again, society, talk about the story that is told us when we're young.
Yeah.
Well, of course, two people coming together, boy, girl, man, woman, has to end in love.
Yeah.
Right? They have these things in common, but it's like, and I hate to, I don't know why this always pops into my head, but Donnie Darko. The whole spectrum of human experience, or human emotion. And we just so often reduce it to a two-person love story.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
So, not saying of course those are great.
Right.
But when you come across a book that's so different, because it doesn't include that, it's quite refreshing.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I have probably produced a list of my favorite novels of kind of romance or like impassioned sexual relation. But not every book has to be a book of that type. Turtle Diary is very much not a book of that type. The Baron in the Trees does involve romance. The Man Who Fell to Earth involves sort of failed romance. Alan Mendelsohn, The Boy from Mars, is about friendship, rather than romance. This feels like, maybe a tangent. But like, I'm sure that kind of if I examined my bookcase, I could present to you books that kind of exhibit admirable stories of romance, or simply admirable stories of sexual obsession. But they happen not to be kind of the handful of books I've chosen for today. Yeah.
Well, there's all kinds of stories.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like, I mean, that in particular, that stood out to you.
Yeah.
What didn't develop into a romance.
Yeah.
And gosh, if there's any more, even one more of that kind of passage, then I'm in.
Yeah.
Because I think I live for passages sometimes.
Yeah, me too.
When I read a book, I'm just like, if it doesn't even matter, if it's plot related, or sometimes we're too focused on, is this moving it forward? Sometimes I don't want it to move it forward. I want it to stop me so that I wish I could have that, read that over and over again.
Right. I mean, I share your wisdom with me. Like, I want a book to tell me what it means to be alive.
Yeah. Oh.
And Turtle Diary is one of those books that tells me what it means to be alive. Whenever I'm teaching, at the end of the semester, I give each of my students a book that I've chosen for them.
I love that.
Not unlike what you do with books on the bed, like books that you've chosen specifically for the authors. Yeah. Occasionally, I have given my students Turtle Diary when it felt to me as if it was the necessary next book on their pathway. And I don't always nail it when I choose a book for a student.
Yeah, there's always the risk you don't.
I always seem to nail it with Turtle Diary.
Interesting.
Yeah, the handful of times I've given that to somebody, it's turned out to be a very important book for them. So certain kinds of readers, I think, will find this book valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you do that. I know that's special for a student to have no matter what. You don't often get a lot of teachers that give that kind of attention to an entire set of students.
Yeah.
And it's only the special ones that get book gifts or recommendations. Yes. But that's...
So I should say that, all right, so whenever I'm at Iowa, I teach 2 workshops.
Yeah.
One is the standard graduate fiction workshop, and the other is a workshop that's dedicated to science fiction and fantasy, where we read kind of great examples of the form and then workshop their own material. So for my standard workshop, I give books on the last day of class. For my science fiction and fantasy workshop, I give wind-up toy robots. Like these kind of wonderful little tin robots some of them like shed sparks as they're walking. And
that's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, I bet it would be so cool to take a class with you.
Thank you. I mean, it's been one of the most valuable aspects of my life for the last 20 years.
And it's a good rhythm you got going up there to Iowa and coming back to Little Rock.
Yeah.
Kind of found at least 2 of these spaces where
yes,
you can make a difference too, it seems.
Right.
In the literary community.
Two among the very few spaces in the world where I actually feel at home as well. Yeah.
Oh, gosh, I love it.
Yeah.
So what about number 5 here?
So the next book on my stack is by Donald Harrington, and it's called The Cockroaches of Staymore.
Huh.
Do you know Donald Harrington?
No.
Okay. So Donald Harrington is an Arkansas novelist. And if you're thinking about novelists who have dedicated themselves to the landscape of Arkansas, Donald Harrington is the best the state has ever produced.
Wow.
He wrote maybe 13 or 14 books. He's another everything writer for me. I got to know him a bit. He passed away, I think, in 2009, 2010, like somewhere around there. The novelists from Arkansas who are most identified with the state tend to operate in a particular comic register. Charles Portis is one of them. Donald Harrington is another. And like there are a handful of other examples I could give you. I'm not really a novelist of that type exactly. Jen Fox is not a novelist of that type either. But if you're talking, well, first of all, if you're talking about Arkansas literature, people don't know who to name. Generally. Like, we're not like Mississippi, where there are certain kind of, icons of literature. Mm-hmm. Harrington is, if you're going to stamp somebody on the Arkansas coin, he's who you should stamp on that coin.
That's high praise.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's a great novelist who tends not to be well known outside of the state.
Well, let's make him well known.
I hope
let's
so.
Let's try to make it happen.
Yeah. So I mean, he's an important writer for me, not only because of what he was able to do on the page, but because he was very generous to me personally when I began publishing. He reached out to me when my second book and first novel was published, The Truth About Celia. He was reviewing it for the state paper, and he also wanted to interview me. And he was just very kind to me. I, interacted in person with him. He lived in Fayetteville. He was an art teacher for the university, kind of an art history teacher. Almost all of his work was fiction. Like, he was a novelist, first and foremost. He said in an interview once that on the first day of each class he taught, he would share his Ars Poetica with the class. And it was basically, this applied to visual art, but also to every other art form. He said that art was an escape from the world that made the world itself, when you return to it, more bearable, more magical, or more understandable. So that was his broad definition of art.
I like that.
You extract yourself from reality. You experience this piece of art. It imbues you with magic, understandability, or bearability, and returns you to the world with those feelings intact. So that was how he thought about art.
Yeah.
And that feels to me like a good, wide-ranging, generous definition of art. Mm-hmm. There are many other definitions, some of which conflict with it, all of which, many of which at least, I'm also very responsive to. But I like Harrington's definition, and I think you can see it at play in his work. All of which, I would say probably every novel he wrote made the world feel all three of those things, more magical, more bearable, and more understandable. Like, even one of them is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
The Cockroaches of Staymore in particular is my favorite of his books, but he's another writer who doesn't have like one and only one iconic title. The people who know his work have not reached a consensus as to which his best book is.
Another one, yeah.
Yeah. The Architecture of the Arkansas Ozarks is often celebrated. It's a novel with what sounds like a textbook title.
Yeah, I was going to say. I was like, what?
His own favorite of his books was called Some Other Place, The Right Place. Although The Cockroaches of Staymore is my favorite, it's not ever the one I recommend people read first. I always recommend The Quiring of the Trees. But The Cockroaches of Staymore is an outlier in some ways in his bibliography. All of his books except the first. The first was called The Cherry Pit. But every book after that is set in kind of a fictional Ozark small community called Staymore. And it's sort of his version of Yoknapatawpha County.
Yeah.
And The Cockroaches of Staymore does indeed adopt cockroaches as its point of view characters.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a work of high comedy that basically is an attempt to transport Tess of the D'Urbervilles to the Ozarks inside a cockroach population. And it's a remarkable book. Like, you know, when people think about not only animals in fiction, but cockroaches in fiction, of course they think of Kafka's The Metamorphosis, which is a great work of literature. And he's absolutely one of the most important writers of the 20th century and one of my favorite writers of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Harrington is equally important in at least my own pantheon, and writes at an equal level of accomplishment, but in a very different tenor. So he's another comic novelist, and he is another novelist who seems to present you with a feeling of pleasure that's not blind to the sufferings that his characters endure. His characters feel wholly human, like even the passing characters just seem to be kind of popping up out of the soil with their souls sort of, you know, fully expressed. So I was hunting for like a passage that I could share with you from this book, and I struggled to kind of find exactly the right passage. It's been a long time since I've read the book. But the one I ended up marking is a few paragraphs, maybe 2/3 of the way through the book, which will give you a sense of sort of the lyric tenor of the prose and also the strange vocabulary that it sometimes adopts.
Cool.
This is chapter 27. Would this redundant rain ever stop? All her life, or at least since the first cold rain she could remember, from her childhood back in November, Tish had loved the rain, its power to magnify all the scents of the world, its ability to quench thirst simply through the vapors it left in the air, to be squeezed from one's sniff whips. Without this moisture, she would not have grown, no less than the trillion plants whose roots were constantly nourished by the water. But enough was enough. The rain had been falling constantly for 5 days, and continuously since the ark of Tish's log home had come to rest atop a sandbar called Ararat, many furlongs down Swain's Creek from Staymore. Would she ever find her way home again? Did she even want to reveal to all the world this Easter egg that kept edging its way out of the end of her abdomen? Maybe the fate thing had intended the rain to wash her and her house away until the Easter egg dropped off the end of her abdomen and was hidden somewhere, or abandoned, or at least left her body unmarked and disemburdened. Jubal had been the first to notice it, and during the downstream voyage, when it was clear he had nothing better to do than take his attention away from the roiling current to observe the condition of the passengers on the vessel, had remarked to her, matter-of-factly, "Looks like somebody has done went and knocked ye up." She had flinched and been unable to say anything or divert her attention from the direction of the current that was carrying the log down the now raging creek. Others of her brothers and sisters had remarked, "Tish is in a family way," or "Tish is PG," or "Tish has got a cake in her oven," or "Tish has swallowed a turnip seed." Or they had said that she was any one of the following: teeming, heavy, catched, gravid, great with child, anticipating, sprung, pisoned, or coming fresh. But mostly they said that she was preggo, and Tish thought she would go crazy hearing them ask, "Are you preggo, Tish? And how did you get so preggo, Tish? And how preggo are you, Tish?" And simply "Preg-o, Tish." But if it had not been for their interest in her Easter egg, they might have been more frightened than they were by their plight. The undirected wandering plunge of the ark down the stream. In the course of the voyage, nearly all of them had become seasick, and despite all their mother had taught them about the need for puking in solitude, they had vomited in one another's presence, openly and unashamedly, and now nobody could stand to go near the remainder of the pile of funeral feeds. Nobody had any appetite. So, it can be difficult to know where to stop when you're reading a passage from Harrington, and I didn't quite know where to stop myself there. I think it's useful to distinguish between writers who proceed sentence by sentence and writers who proceed paragraph by paragraph. In other words, who adopt those as sort of the smallest narrative units in their prose. Almost every writer can be slotted into one category or the other. There are exceptions, though. And Harrington, I think, is one of those exceptions. He has a particular lyric mode that is, it tends to string itself out on the page. And I don't know that his prose kind of subdivides neatly into sentences and paragraphs. I didn't quite know where to stop when I was kind of sharing an excerpt from his work.
It's like a positive connotation for wanting to be strung along.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, just keep going.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I'll stop when I feel like it.
Yeah. There's the moment at the end of the song when the band just begins jamming, and they could keep doing it as long as they care to.
Yeah.
Because they're just... the music has overtaken them. You get the feeling reading Harrington that the music has overtaken him from the very first page.
Wow.
He is a writer in whom you hear song, but I think the reason I chose that passage in particular is because it mentions something he calls the fate thing. The line is, maybe the fate thing had intended the rain to wash her and her house away until the Easter egg dropped off the end of her abdomen and was hidden somewhere or abandoned or at least left her body unmarked and disemburdened. Easter egg is cockroach-specific vocabulary in this book. Spindle whips is cockroach-specific vocabulary for the antennae. And there are lots of other cockroach-specific pieces of vocabulary here. The fate thing is not one of them. This is a term that Harrington uses across his books.
Oh, interesting.
And it's how many of his characters are best capable of conceiving the divine. Most of them, whether they're believers or non-believers, right? They can be reluctant to talk about God. But all of them feel as if they've been gripped by some sort of pattern or meaning that is giving shape to their lives. Harrington himself had that same feeling.
Yeah.
He wrote one memoir or unusually autobiographical novel called Let Us Build Us a City. And it's about the narrator/author's visits to many ghost towns in Arkansas.
Oh.
And he encounters a particular woman in some of these spaces who has been in correspondence with him and who would later become his wife. And this is like based on Harrington's own story. Huh. He was in correspondence with a woman named Kim, eventually Kim Harrington. I'm not sure. I can't remember what her maiden name was. When he talked about whatever it was that allowed the two of them to find each other, that was the piece of vocabulary he resorted to. It was the fate thing that had taken him in its hands. And how fortunate it was for him that the fate thing was benevolence. Harrington is like Tevis in one respect. He wrote a number of very early books and then had a long drought in which he handed himself over to drink and despair. The Cockroaches of Staymar marked the end of that drought for him. Whoa. It was the first book he published. And there are moments in this book in which you can see him offering a veiled account of his relationship with his wife. So Harrington was stricken deaf as a child from illness. He was maybe 10 or 11 or 12 when he lost his hearing. And this meant that, unfortunately, my experience with him predated the days of texting because it would have been the most natural medium in the world with which to kind of converse. He did like a pre-technological version of that. When you would see him at public events, he carried note cards. And so he would jot down messages on them and hand them to you, and you would jot messages back and hand them along to him. There is a character in The Cockroaches of Staymore whose spindle web's antennae have been broken by circumstance. So his senses aren't operating the ways in which everybody else's senses are.
Wow.
And nonetheless, he manages to find love with the Tish character, whose POV I was just reading from.
That's beautiful.
Right. So it's another example of a strange, very strange book written in a mode that feels as if it would be alien from the intimacies of human experience, and yet somehow absolutely is not. All of his books feel kind of... I'm almost inclined to say that there are no flat characters in his books. That can't be the case, because they're crowded with people. But at the least opportunity, they will suddenly reveal new facets of themselves to you while you're reading. He referred to them lovingly as hillbillies. Like he felt that like he had the privilege of using that term because he was one of them.
Yeah.
And the community in which they all reside is Staymore, and they consider themselves Staymorons. So, I mean, he's a very funny writer.
Yeah.
All of his books, the final chapters are always written in the future tense as a way of sort of gesturing to the idea that although this book is about to end, these stories are ongoing. On the binding of many of his books is a quotation. I wonder if it's on The Cockroaches of Staymore. It's not. I think it was maybe Fred Chappell. Here it is. Oh, and this was Entertainment Weekly and Fred Chappell. So this is part of his author bio. The last sentence in Harrington's author bio is, he has been called an undiscovered continent, Fred Chappell, and America's greatest unknown novelist, Entertainment Weekly. That feels right to me. Portis is also often discussed as kind of, you know, the great unknown novelist of America, but he's no longer unknown.
Yeah,
like
I would say
he's
that's
being
not
very
accurate.
widely read at this point. In part, that's due to the kind of good offices of Jay Jennings, who lives here in Little Rock and who edited kind of the Library of America volumes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and who was, you know, who befriended Portis and has done a lot to kind of reintroduce his name to, you know, the American literary imagination.
Yeah, and I
if
think
if you've ever come back through Little Rock, and like you should talk to Jay. Like, because I mean he's written a book of his own, but has also been a real advocate for Charles Portis and his work.
Yeah, I think we need those for authors that we feel either are not, have never received the recognition, or maybe the recognition is faded with generations and needs to be brought back.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
that's, I think if you can dedicate yourself to anything as a reader, find those authors that you want to be read more widely and just keep trying to get them out there.
Yep. He is, I mean, unquestionably one of those writers.
I can't wait to read them.
Yeah. If you don't find the idea of reading a novel about cockroaches off-putting, then this is a fine one to start with.
I definitely don't.
But I've definitely got kind of a good list of my top 5 Harrington books on my website. Probably with kind of links to various essays I've written about him over the years.
Yeah.
And again, The Quiring of the Trees dedicates itself to human characters rather than cockroaches and might be kind of a more sensible entry point for most readers. This one happens to be signed, my copy of The Cockroaches of Staymore. And it's, I guess it was signed on April 17th, 2004 by Donald Harrington. And it says, for Kevin, the one book of mine that might be worth your fantasy and imagination. Best, Don.
I love
which
that.
is very, very gracious.
Yeah.
And
That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, he was giving a signing at Wordsworth Bookstore in Little Rock. And, you know, I had met a number of Arkansas writers there over the years. Jack Butler, another great example of an Arkansas writer who works in that kind of like very humane comic mode that Portis and Harrington and some others work in.
That's awesome.
Like that seems to be sort of what the state specializes in, even though it's not what I do.
Yeah. I'm loving learning about these new Arkansas authors.
Yeah.
Kind of a hidden territory for me.
Yes.
So that's really cool.
I mean, a hidden territory for many, many people. Yeah.
Yeah, got to explore it.
Yes.
So do you have a
Right,
six?
so book number 6. Okay. So I thought that, I had a number of possibilities in mind, but I also thought that we could conceivably randomize this. So either maybe I can ask you to choose one of my possibilities, or we can just do something completely random where I ask you to give me 3 numbers. Which would you like to do?
Okay. Let's do... So me choose, meaning go to the...
No, you choose. If you're going to choose one of the handful that I kind of imagined ahead of time. All right.
So I mean, you say them and then
I could say them and you could choose them, or you could go to the bookcase and choose a book that you'd like me to talk about, or I could ask you to give me 3 different numbers, and then I will use those numbers to land on a book.
Let's do that.
Okay. All right. So let's do a letter and 2 numbers. Give me A, B, C, or D.
B.
Okay. Give me 1 through 6.
4.
B, 4, and give me 1 through 20.
14.
B, 4, 14. Okay. A, B, C, D. And so this is where we're going to start. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All right, I'm going to ask you to choose a book on either side of this because I Landed on the Heart. I Landed on the Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers, which I disallowed myself. So
let's go
Crash by J.G. Ballard or To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf.
Let's do Crash.
Okay. All right, I'm glad that kind of Ballard made the cut because he's a very important writer for me. I don't think anybody else has discussed him so far in Books on the Bed.
Definitely not.
Okay. Crash is my favorite of Ballard's novels, but my favorite of his books is the complete short stories. And I'll talk about both of them for you. Ballard was British. He began as kind of a genre science fiction writer and gradually began to turn his hand to other forms. His first 4 books were all novels of apocalypse that found ways to end the world through one environmental calamity or another. And he's begun to be discussed as a very early example of what people call climate fiction or cli-fi. Those books are The Drowned World, The Burning World, The Crystal World, and The Wind from Nowhere. And you can imagine the apocalypses that ensue in these books. Midway through his career, he began writing more transgressive fiction. Initially, he was an unusually literary and artful example of hard science fiction. He ventured into other territories. Crash is the most notorious of his novels. It was adapted in the 90s into a movie by David Cronenberg. This is not the one that won the Oscar in 2006 or whatever. It was an early, very controversial movie. And so Crash is a novel and was later a movie about characters who achieve erotic satisfaction through the imagery and the actualizations of car crashes. So it's a great, weird, obsessive work of fiction. I'll read a passage to you momentarily. The other book for which he is best known is The Empire of the Sun, which was also adapted into a movie by Steven Spielberg. And this is an autobiographical novel about a young boy who is living in China when during World War II, when it's invaded by the Japanese, and who ends up in a Japanese internment camp. And, later, is released from this camp. But it's about kind of his experience of this space as a very small boy who in some ways considers it just a space of adventure because he happens to be 11 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a great book, a great movie. He's been kind of well-serviced by the adaptations. There's another one called High Rise that was adapted a few years ago for film. Crash. So famously, when Ballard wrote Crash and submitted it to his publisher, it did not land immediately in his editor's hands. It landed in the hands of a first reader who didn't know that Ballard had a relationship with the press. And the first reader's report on this book was, "This author is beyond psychiatric help. Do not publish!" Exclamation point.
That's incredible.
And in fact, Ballard was subsumed in grief during the moment at which he wrote this book. So he had been vacationing in Spain with his two, maybe three small children and his wife. And his wife suffered a sudden health event and died, leaving him to raise his children on his own without a partner. And some of his work in this middle period of his career emerged out of that psychological space. Crash is one of those books. And I'm going to talk about Crash, and along with it, I'm going to talk about some of his short fiction. So let me share with you just the opening paragraph of Crash. Vaughn died yesterday in his last car crash. During our friendship, he had rehearsed his death in many crashes, but this was his only true accident. Driven on a collision course towards the limousine of the film actress, his car jumped the rails of the London airport flyover and plunged through the roof of a bus filled with airline passengers. The crushed bodies of packaged tourists, like a hemorrhage of the sun, still lay across the vinyl seats when I pushed my way through the police engineers an hour later. Holding the arm of her chauffeur, the film actress Elizabeth Taylor, with whom Vaughn had dreamed of dying for so many months, stood alone under the revolving ambulance lights. As I knelt over Vaughn's body, she placed a gloved hand to her throat. Could she see, in Vaughn's posture, the formula of the death which he had devised for her? During the last weeks of his life, Vaughn thought of nothing else but her death, a coronation of wounds he had staged with the devotion of an Earl Marshal. The walls of his apartment near the film studios at Shepperton were covered with the photographs he had taken through his zoom lens each morning as she left her hotel in London, from the pedestrian bridges above the westbound motorways, and from the roof of the multi-story car park at the studios. The magnified details of her knees and hands, of the inner surface of her thighs, and the left apex of her mouth, I uneasily prepared for Vaughn on the copying machine in my office, handing him the packages of prints as if they were the installments of a death warrant. At his apartment, I watched him matching the details of her body with the photographs of grotesque wounds and a textbook of plastic surgery. So Ballard is, I think, a remarkable stylist with this unusually sort of sophisticated, kind of creamy British timbre that turns to perversion and obsession at the least opportunity. There are little bits of phrasing here that are kind of classic Ballard. The crushed bodies of packaged tourists, like a hemorrhage of the sun. That's very much the kind of phrasing you can expect to find in his books. A coronation of wounds, that is Ballard through and through.
Yeah.
The left apex of her mouth. Things like that. I'm going to grab the complete short story so that I can share kind of similar passages. So Martin Amis talked about Ballard as one of, the writers who belonged in his personal pantheon of influences. He's in my personal pantheon as well. And Amis also said that he thought of him as having written the finest science fiction stories, short stories of the 20th century.
Wow.
Which basically meant the finest science fiction short stories that existed up to that point. Yes. Yeah. And I agree with that. I think he was a very interesting novelist, but his real métier was the short form. And I don't think there is anybody who did it better than he did. Ballard liked to talk about the value of what he called extreme metaphor. And he said something along the lines of, that basically it was inside extreme metaphors that narratives were waiting to be born. And you can see that inside the work he does. You can also see that kind of impulse inside a lot of the work that I do.
Yeah.
He's another everything writer for me. There are probably 25 books, something like that. Easily my favorite is The Complete Stories of J.G. Ballard, but Crash is a good close second. The stories add up to more than 1,000 pages of work, almost 1,200 very densely packed pages of work. And I read it in basically a great gulp, over the course of maybe a week or something like that, whenever it was originally published. Like, this is the American edition. I've also got the British edition, which came out, 7 or 8 years earlier than the American edition did. So I thank you, Amazon UK, for allowing me to import it, way back when. It was a truly profound reading experience for me. I felt when I was reading that book as if I was experiencing kind of a system of deeply personal metaphysics. And it was not at all a reassuring metaphysics. It was exactly the opposite. Most of the writers I love the best, all of the writers with whom I've already the other 5 writers on my stack of 6 are writers who bring to my own experience an abundance of life. Ballard does exactly the opposite. And that's why I value him. While I'm reading Ballard, I feel as if I am being emptied of life. I'm only this kind of membrane of awareness with nothing inside of it and nothing outside of it. And it makes me feel while I'm reading his books, it makes me feel that I'm experiencing some deeply true, austere version of a disturbing reality. And I admire him for that reason. He's also an example of a writer. So, I think there are different ways for writers to grow across the course of a career. And most writers either grow bigger or they grow deeper. Ballard was a writer who grew deeper, but he tended to grow deeper along a particular line of thinking and then would abandon it. He would feel that he had gone as far as he could. Actually, he would go a little bit farther than he should have. He would write one book that was kind of the perfect example of this, and then one more book and realize, okay,
now I'm done.
I'm done. And he would move on to something else and grow as deep along that line as he possibly could. Calvino is an exception to this kind of dichotomy. He didn't grow deeper or bigger. He just changed again and again and again, kind of shed his skin and became a completely different writer with every book. Ballard was a writer who grew deeper, and his stories are truly remarkable. I don't know that there is another writer who possesses the same ease of eloquence that Ballard does. And there are passages in these stories that don't feel hard-won. It just feels to me as if Ballard he trusted that if he set off in pursuit of an expression, he would reach it. And he always did reach it. I think the short stories of his that are probably his highest accomplishments, there's one called The Voices of Time, and there's one called The Drowned Giant. And if you're looking for just the flavor of Ballard, and particularly his short stories, I would read one of those. The Voices of Time is the story that I think speaks the most deeply to people who have a background in science fiction.
Okay.
The Drowned Giant is the one that speaks the most deeply to people who don't have that background. So,
thank you once again.
Yeah. So you've got passages. So The Drowned Giant, for instance, is about a giant. It's a fantasy figure, but treated through a very kind of clinical, medicalistic science fiction lens. A giant is deceased, and its corpse washes up on a beach, and it's greeted by kind of the people nearby, initially with a feeling of wonder, but gradually that wonder kind of seeps out of them, and he becomes a subject for curiosity and degradation and ultimately just commerce. And there's a passage here that like I can share with you. This is after the giant has begun to decay. The combined effects of seawater and the tumefaction of the tissues had given the face a sleeker and less youthful look, although the vast proportions of the features made it impossible to assess the age and character of the giant. On my previous visit, his classically modeled mouth and nose suggested that he had been a young man of discreet and modest temper. Now, however, he appeared to be at least in early middle age. The puffy cheeks, thicker nose and temples, and narrowing eyes gave him a look of well-fed maturity that even now hinted at a growing corruption to come. This accelerated post-mortem development of the giant's character, as if the latent elements of his personality had gained sufficient momentum during his life to discharge themselves in a brief final resume, continued to fascinate me. It marked the beginning of the giant's surrender to that all-demanding system of time in which the rest of humanity finds itself, and of which, like the million twisted ripples of a fragmented whirlpool, our finite lives are the concluding products. So that feels to me like an unusually articulate expression of an experience that I think is recognizable, but that almost always goes completely unexpressed. And one of the values of Ballard is his capacity for expressing these things. All right, so one more paragraph. This is from the other of his stories that I love so much, called The Voices of Time, which is in fact my favorite of his short stories, like as somebody with a background in reading science fiction.
You got to read it then.
So this is the last paragraph of the story. And basically what happens here is that there is an instrument that begins to detect systems of enumeration emanating from different bodies in the universe. And gradually within the story, these are all counting down. And gradually within the story, they discover that like these bodies are distant enough from each other that their countings are reaching us from very different numbers in the sequence, but that if you do the proper calculations, they're all going to end at exactly the same moment. So time is sort of pacing, if not hurtling, toward its conclusion, and kind of expressing that to anybody who happens to be listening. The creatures of the world are also beginning to evolve mysteriously toward what looks as if it might be a forthcoming calamity. So this is the very last paragraph of the story. Cauldron returned to his seat and lay back quietly, his eyes gazing across the lines of exhibits. Half asleep, periodically he leaned up and adjusted the flow of light through the shutter, thinking to himself, as he would do through the coming months, of Powers and his strange mandala, and of the Seven and their journey to the white gardens of the moon, and the blue people who had come from Orion and spoken in poetry to them of ancient beautiful worlds beneath golden suns in the island galaxies, vanished forever now in the myriad deaths of the cosmos.